Amazing. Here we are again. And yeah, it's a big pleasure today to talk about accountability and how to um, express your expectations uh, when you see struggles with your employees, when you see struggles as a founder in being in that leadership role, and you see that you think I'm the bad guy, but you don't have to be the bad guy, and just talking about that topic because I think at least for me it is a topic that I was always struggling deeply in, especially during Series A and Series B phase, where I had such a like inner need to feel loved and to feel like I'm friends with everybody. Um, that is probably that is which isn't a healthy thing, because then in the moment where things weren't going right, you build up that anger, and I built up that anger all the time, and then I was until the moment where I was internally said, okay, I really can't work with that person anymore, because I it was only a like more of an inner dialogue that led from me being not satisfied with somebody's performance or task or whatever, towards going so far that my inner dialogue led me, okay, we need to separate because it doesn't work, without having that actually having expressed that expectation and having expressed what I really wanted in an open way. And then because I always waited so long, that it piled up, that even those conversations were so awkward because I was internally so angry. So it's like, how did you manage that, Valerie? How did you manage to express what you wanted without kind of being perceived as the villain?
Yeah, it's a interesting topic because I think the word of accountability already implies that you need to have something defined, right, to account to. And that's what you actually just said, that accountability actually starts with clear expectations, I guess on both sides. Um, but so I think that's already a quite interesting topic to look at, setting the right expectations or goals and the accountability of achieving them. But then I do feel also accountability starts with ourselves, in a way of like, what are our, I mean, or what is your personal values, so to say, do they match the person who is supposed to hold you accountable? Because obviously, if you yourself don't feel any accountability to yourself, in terms of like, I have been, for example, a big procrastinator, um, then it's very difficult to be accountable against others. So I do think it is the outside perspective. We just talked about the inner game and the outer game, but that's for a later period of this or episode of this podcast. But I would say the outside game is really like the goal setting and accountability, and the inner game is, yeah, what are your values, and how are you dealing with the expectations you set to yourself, and do you keep yourself accountable for that? Yeah, that's are the thoughts going through my mind when I'm looking at the topic.
Yeah, that deeply resonates with me. I feel like that the I mean, accountability towards, first of all, yourself. I mean, this is something that probably I had to learn the hard way of, when you don't take care of yourself, what happens, and if you don't focus a certain amount of time, because we're also talking in another context about like parenting and all that, and then it's easy to feel accountable and then do everything for others, but also not holding yourself accountable to what do you truly need, to also perform, right? And then it leads into the culture, because we're all, as we talked in the first and the former episodes about, is when we don't hold ourselves accountable, and focus on ourselves and our own inner state, we won't be able to. We will carry that kind of that energy, the negative energy, into every room we enter. And so I think for me, the culture of accountability, and how to create that is a difficult question, because it always, for me, starts with how do I treat myself? What are the expectations to myself? Am I clear with what I expect from myself? Can I communicate that? And based on that, I think, as you mentioned, it's all about how can I express what I truly want from somebody and what I truly expect from somebody, because without that, there's no foundation. And so you basically throw somebody in the water as a leader and say swim, but you don't give direction. So that means it can go completely into, you can either swim to that island or you can swim into nowhere. And I think it's a leadership responsibility to frame what do you truly expect from somebody, and then also that kind of continuous check-in, because sometimes when I caught myself in the situation where I had expectations and even expressed that expectation, and after a quarter, the person was probably doing something else, and I was like, "Wait, we talked about it a quarter ago." But it's also kind of, I think, the acknowledgement that from time to time we all lose ourselves in the weeds, and it's important. And this is where leadership is for, and management is for, to give you that perspective in where in the weeds are you currently, right? Because in the day-to-day hustle you lose that. And I think I just had that realization myself when I was going into like New Year's planning and stuff, where I was like, what were actually my goals for last year? And somehow in the last quarter, I lost what I was really like. Q1, Q2, Q3, it was very much of like, oh yeah, I focused on my personal like goals. And then in Q4, I somehow lost it. And I was like, oh, this is like, it's, and I think this is kind of, it's not a one, what I want to express with what I said is, it's not a one-time thing. It's something that is kind of needs repetition, because the especially in a startup, it's such a changing environment, and you make decisions every day that kind of change the trajectory and also certain requirements. So I think it's more. I think it starts with the accountability to really express that expectations and repeat them and adapt them. Um, so it comes down a lot for me to the right communication. And for me today, it's much easier to express that without that negative emotion that I always had when somebody was not doing what I wanted, right? And this is and I know your book of wisdom about control and not control, and letting it flow. So I hand over the mic again to you, Val, because I think yeah, your journey about building trust and letting go control is fabulous.
Thank you. I don't know exactly where you refer to, but you can help maybe my memory. However,
Oh no, I was called the horse story was the most. Whenever I think about trust and control, the horse comes into my mind. I don't. This was like your miss. This is the deepest, but maybe it's also too deep. You don't have to share that. But I was like,
no,
every time.
okay.
Building
This is a good. This is
Yeah.
this is a very good one. But let's summarize what you just said, because I think it leads us there. So you definitely need, so to say, to be a role model yourself, because that's the energy you're putting into the game, so to say. I do think it's a very important point. Then, as you said, you need to set the goals correctly, so to say, in order that everyone knows what they're made accountable for, and also to avoid bad surprises. And then I think the third thing you said was, okay, it needs to be continuously followed up, uh, because also goals can change, situations can change, and maybe also the perspective both people have on these goals. will change how accountable they really are for what was originally agreed. So I think these are three extremely good points. And what I wanted to add, and it leads us a little bit to the horse story, is that in the end of the day, you need to feel also a certain motivation to fulfill goals in order to, so to say, fulfill your accountability. Because I do feel myself that if I don't have a clear motivation towards these goals I've set to myself, I cannot hold myself accountable psychologically. I will defer. I will find other things which seem to be more important at the moment. So it is maybe also a good thing to question, how high is your motivation, and how high is the motivation of the person you want to make accountable towards these goals. And if there's a high motivation for whatever reason, because hopefully we may be giving those people these goals which are really maybe made for them, meaning that we're really giving goals based on strength and not on position. I'm often seeing that managers tend to just give goals based on the company, and the people they are actually having employed or in a certain position, but maybe it's not the right person for it, because maybe there's no connection or no motivation, or I don't know, maybe there's no fit to the strengths of that person. And there, I believe it is really important to look at, let's say, rather, so to say, hire or appoint people on strength than on title, and try to avoid actually that people need to do things they don't want to do. So this is the motivational part I wanted to add before we're coming to the horse story. And the horse story it's quite an interesting one. It looks at a little bit the other perspective of things that I feel we can talk about, these logical workflow, so to say, of how to set goals, and then making it possible that you can actually enforce accountability. So this is the, let's say, how to do it way. But there's obviously also the role of that manager, and I was this kind of micromanaging manager, and I did think that this would, so to say, increase accountability quite a lot. So I really, so to say, enforced that the process we were just talking about about. But I actually forgot in the whole experience that people might perceive you, and people did perceive me as a micromanager, that if you are too hard with that, if you're too detail oriented, it has the implication that people feel that you actually don't trust them to do it. So if you let accountability, so to say, become some like a force of mistrust, it's definitely a counter opposite to inspiring and motivating people. And the reason was obviously not that I truly really mistrusted the people I worked with, that they couldn't do the task. It was more deeply rooted in my youth and my upbringing, because I think we mentioned it already. I had the interesting adventure of my first years that I basically grew up without parents, and because I never had someone to, let's say, trust or to rely on, let's put it like this, trust was something which was basically just not delivered to me, and therefore I had a very hard time to deliver that to other people. And here comes the story with the horse. So I was sitting actually at the psychologist who was supposed to coach us all, and also me, on trust. And I asked her, so if I don't have trust, how can I learn it? And she said to me, you just have to experience it. And I said, but I can't just go onto the street or ask my best friend here, Andreas, and say, hey, trust do you trust me? I trust you, and that's the experience. I mean, trust is not something you can just, so to say, experience in the moment, and that's it. However, so I asked her how I can experience it. She didn't have a good answer. So I left quite frustrated. And then I was, a few weeks later, forced to have a writing lesson because one of my very good friends had a daughter in the same age like me, and she wanted to give the experience of the kid to the kids to have a riding lesson. And yeah, my experience with horses was basically not that good for several reasons. However, she forced me on a riding lesson. On that riding lesson, I apparently ended up to sit on a blind horse, but I didn't know about it. So I thought it was a fully functioning horse, so to say. So I was riding and also being quite fast on the horse until the moment when the teacher actually said, "Do you recognize something special with that horse?" And I said, "No." And then she said to me, "Hey, the horse does not see anything." And I mean, I almost fell off the horse in shock. Um, and I still remember it came through me like yeah, just a huge shock. And I realized, wow, this is trust. I mean, if you can sit on a on a soul, so to say, and that yeah, soul is basically trusting you so much that you lead that animal with every step and go that fast as I did. That's only enabled by deep trust that actually I, who was the rider, can lead us both through that experience. So yeah, actually that was the first, I must say, real experience with trust in my life. And it's really impressive how much change these moments have on your life, because obviously based on that experience, and that's why, Andreas, you know this story, my whole um understanding, so to say. And I mean, with understanding, I mean not rational understanding, but also a soul understanding and emotional understanding changed. And obviously, as I had made the experience, I could also give this experience on to other people. And it's really funny because I think from a micromanager, I developed more to someone who is actually not caring at all. Maybe I'm doing even too little right now with the people I'm leading. Um, but I mean, luckily, most of them say that they love me. So I hope they honestly do. However, my idea now is really that we all should be driven by our own motivation, and we should be actually supported in the strengths we are having. And if this is the case, and if you as a leader make sure that the person you're working with and you're gonna give a goal to or make accountable for something is right in their position and motivated to do it, then actually no control should be needed. That was my big trust experience on a horse.
No, this is not. I think it's such a beautiful story because it's also kind of your your trust comes from that place, right? It's like you learn to trust from a place of like, okay, now I'm going on a horse. I assume that the horse knows what to do, and probably the horse thought you're leading her or him, and you thought and it's like the other way around because the horse knows how to go and where to go, and so it's funny enough. And I'm happy that it ended up as a beautiful experience, and I think this also for me my personal thing is I think trust is also it is an experience. The word is often over or misused in a business context because for me it's like I have a very simple principle around that, which is I always first I give trust. A lot of people say I give too much, I trust too much, but I think it changes your life experience because if you it gives something beautiful to the other side when you're true when you say no I trust you and you it comes from a pure place, then people feel freedom, people feel safe, people feel hold, and then um, and then over time, right, it also develops, right? So you give trust, and then either a person kind of builds up to that level that you gave in the beginning, or you will after a very short time say, okay, it doesn't work, right? And then you can also express it. But I felt, since I am able, and it took me also till probably 2022, as I could really understand what that word means, um, which is quite a long time in my life journey. Um, Once you experience that, what trust means, I think then it's something that can be such a powerful leadership tool, because the moments where you will be disappointed with trust will be compared, if you have a conscious like observation of how many positive experiences you will make. I would always say there is no such thing as kind of over trust. You trust, and then and in life there will be probably one out of 10 times it won't work out. That's probably my ratio. And just consciously observing yourself is, do you make that one thing, because it was probably then a negative experience, a general thing again, or do you actually acknowledge, hey, no, but the other 9 things worked? So it's a continuous better operating model than being than being micromanager or in control.
And I want to add on this too, because you're so right. Because if we're looking at the situation from the other end, imagine you have 10 people, so to say, and you're mistrusting them and you're trying to micro control them. Yeah. Or, yeah, I just try to find many measures how to push them to certain goals. Then the interesting thing is that person out of 10 you mentioned you can't trust will anyway not succeed if you micro control that person or not. In no case it will lead to the success. But those 9 of the 10 who you could have trusted and who are actually willed to fulfill, hopefully, what is agreed, mutually agreed, those people will be highly dismotivated by someone who will push them or microcontrol, or try to find strange measures of accountability. And so therefore, basically, you're limiting your own performance or the performance possibility of the whole team by mistrusting. So I would say it's in any case the better solution, to trust and to go into that relationship with a positive mindset.
Hmm. That's 100% true. I think what often the I think at least I struggled, and I see some other first-time founders struggle with that, because it's complicated sometimes to translate what does it mean, right, into your day-to-day context with trust. And because you don't know what to do, right? So the question is, what is an expectation, right? And what do you trust that person to do? And I think for me, there was always that it depends on the level of what do you want to actually achieve, right? If you think very concrete, if you're the CEO, you're holding that vision, and you know, okay, like I want that product to be like that, or I want, and then you bring in somebody probably with, especially as first time founder, with more experience than you in that area. And then you trust that that person um, knows how to translate vision into execution, for example, right? And because you don't know what execution is, right? Because you haven't been a like full edge product manager and or marketeer or salesperson. And so I think it's becoming, for me it became, over the phases of different stages of the startup development, trust could be translated into to the how. And I was trusting I was discussing the why. I think I still like owned in that, but the what to do we discussed, and I trusted like both sides had kind of perspectives that were great. So I trusted also that perspective, but on the how to how to do this now, how to execute, I felt always this is where I would have like love to learn it earlier that I can trust with that, because you one person comes from experience and one person just comes from some random assumptions to a certain extent, or beliefs. You can still express them, but you I think if you hire somebody at least with a certain experience, you need to trust that they know how, right, how to do it. And I think this was when I reflect about it, this is something I would have wished I would have learned earlier.
Yeah, that's actually let's say reminded me of something, how I would translate trust, um because I do feel what is actually trust. And you saying, I mean, more or less like also the ability, right? The how is the ability to fulfill makes the trust. But I would also say, because I have a really good friend called Andreas, he taught me actually that trust is also communication. And what I mean with that is that when I was working with people, you might think that you're agreeing on the same thing, right? Or that the goal is clear for both in the same way. But since we all have very different backgrounds and experiences, and do and might interpret things as so to say right or wrong in a very different way, because of our personal upbringing, because of experiences we made, and maybe even about because of dreams we still have, or the future of our life. The same thing could be looked at very different. And sometimes I experienced that trust was lost in the other person because my expectation was different, or I thought that I did something really good. But the actually the other party might even think, okay, yeah, that was great, but actually in the end of the day I wanted something completely different. So I would say that the only way of, let's say, avoiding that, and you probably can never fully avoid that because we're all so special and so unique in our personalities, which is great. But the only way of, let's say, producing a good outcome and to probably keep trust alive is to rather, someone said that to me, over communicate in these moments, and try to really explain, okay, that's where I'm coming from, that's why I'm doing this, or that's how I understood this. And by that, shaping, so to say, the view from both parties onto what we're actually doing here, how we are doing it, and what is expected from both sides. So I feel that trust could be also translated into communication. And I was just thinking that my main tool of actually establishing great conversations with team members was the growth coaching. I don't know if I'm talking now too long when I'm explaining that, but I felt often that when I didn't have the chance to talk to team members too much, and I think as a CEO especially, you have 6 direct reports, and then you have massive amount of people, and time is actually very short. So you really need to try to figure out, how can I stay connected and understand the people I'm working with. And so I regularly did, I mean, sometimes like every half a year, sometimes every quarter, sometimes only once a year, a growth coaching with people I worked with. And in the growth coaching, it's a very nice tool. You talk about every letter of the word growth. So you look at the growth, at the goals, sorry, at the goals of a person. Then R for, I mean, after G, is the reality. Then it's O, the options the person can take, and so on and so forth. So you look at the different steps of the coaching. And actually, the interesting thing was that the goal of this growth coaching is actually not to especially identify how the person is thinking about reaching their goals or not, but actually to also receive feedback as the leader or the goal setter, which maybe that person would have not given you. Back to the conversational part here. If you would have just said, hey, how am I doing? As your manager, can you give me feedback? Yeah, and be please very honest with me about how I set the goals or how I'm working with you. I would say in 99% of the all cases I work with people, even though I try to really open the door to really get honest feedback, I never got it, because it's their people's job and they don't want to lose their job and they don't want to tell you in the face, which would have maybe been good for me sometimes. Hey, Val, you're an idiot. You know, they won't tell you. So I try to find ways of like getting and receiving honest feedback. And I would say this feedback helps the conversation and helps you to understand maybe challenges someone has with accomplishing the goal, and then opens the door for you to actually do better conversation with that person. And by that, we're coming back to trust, building more trust. That was a very long speech. Sorry for that, Andreas. But
This was also, it was amazing. And there's also a perfect, I think, kind of end to what it could mean in a company context. And I think that's super important. And now I will be your accountability partner to say, like, we close the session because you have a family obligation and to holding you as a parent, as a mother. I think this is we can do another session about what does it actually mean in a parenting relation, because their trust is a complete different level, right? But I was just thinking about that, and yeah, I think this was a beautiful session, and thank you again for sharing, and thank you for listening, and yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody very soon.
absolutely, I can't wait. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.